Hello friends and followers, welcome back to my channel Microscopic Biology. Today's biotalk topic is the scientific method. Stay tuned for more about what the scientific method is and what this has to do with the National Football League. Most people think that the scientific method is used only by scientists who are conducting experiments. However, without really knowing it, every single time you collect data, you are using the scientific method. So, what is the scientific method? Well, the scientific method explains how we ask and answer questions. The scientific method begins with an observation. Any observation, it doesn't have to be scientific. For example, an imaginary friend lives in New York City. One day on his day to work, he sees a whole line of taxis in front of him. This observation leads him to ask a question. What percentage of cars in New York City are taxis? Now our friend makes the hypothesis that 20% of all cars in New York City are taxis. In our real world, our hypotheses generally tend to fall under these lines. There are more blank than blank, so-and-so will live longer than so-and-so, and the list goes on. Yet all of these hypotheses are based on an observation and questions. After we make a hypothesis, we perform an experiment, like counting the taxis, waiting to see who will live longer, looking under the microscope to find what things actually look like, to name a few. If our hypothesis is not valid, then we restate our hypothesis and look back at the experiment or continue experimenting. Once our hypothesis is valid, then we make a theory. Examples include, but are not limited to, members of this family will live longer than this family, there will always be more blank than blank, and 30% of all cars in New York City are taxis. Now, even after making a theory, we do not stop experimenting or researching. Instead, we try to find examples that prove or disprove the theory. If we find data that disproves the theory, then we have to rethink the theory. For example, 30% of all cars in New York City are not taxis. Instead, we might say that 30% of all moving cars in New York City are taxis, since there are many taxi cabs parked in taxi depots. If we cannot find any data that disproves our theory, then the theory becomes a law. Some of the most famous laws include the conservation of energy law, which states that energy cannot be created or destroyed, and many others like Newton's law of planetary motion, physics, gravity, so on and so forth. Now you're probably wondering, what on earth did Mike mean when he said that the scientific method was related to the NFL? Well, let's think about it a little bit. The NFL was started based on the question, which football team will win the Super Bowl? By observing the games, fans form hypotheses based on which team will win the bowl. Then the playoff games and the finals are experimenting to see which team is the best. If a team's fans find that their hypothesis that this team would win was proven wrong, then they wait a season or move on to a different team. After a certain team has won the Super Bowl multiple times, 6 or more in a row, then I would consider it safe to theorize that this team is the best team. If a team continues to win the following Super Bowls, then after some years that theory may become a law. However, in all actuality, winning a Super Bowl 3 times in a row is an amazing feat. Looking at the real definition of the scientific method, we can see that every single day we use the scientific method. Given that fact, anyone who uses the scientific method is a scientist. That means that we are all scientists, regardless of our intellect. So, there we go. That is what the scientific method is, and how the NFL uses the scientific method to attract fans from all around. If you have any further questions, please email me at microscopicbiology@gmail.com. See y'all next time, and as always, I'm Mike from Microscopic Biology.